In this video, we are taking a look into 3ds Max's command panels and all the different tabs that give you access to a huge function set for all sorts of workflows, from modeling to animation. We'll focus on how to use the command panel, where to find certain types of commands according to workflow, and what to expect when you're working in this part of the interface. The command panel is where you do most of your creation and modifying in your scene and is organized into different tabs that correspond to a type of workflow. The command panel comprises 6 user interface panels that give you access to most of the features of 3ds Max. You can only see one panel at a time by clicking on their icon. Moving from the left to the right, we have the Create panel, Modify panel, Hierarchy, Motion, Display, and Utilities. 3ds Max is always open by default to the Create panel, and the Create panel always has the Geometry tab open. Starting at the Geometry tab, the tools that are available within the Create panel are Geometry, Shapes for 2D, Lights, Cameras, Helper Objects, Space Warps, and Systems. This is where you can find Biped, Daylight System, and Bones. The Geometry button houses all of your pre-designed 3D objects called primitives. We have a drop-down menu with different types of primitives, starting with the standard primitives, going all the way down to stairs, windows, and so on. To create a standard primitive, we click on the button. I'm going to click on Sphere, move into the perspective viewport, click and drag. We can edit the parameters of that sphere by changing its parameters here. We can type in a different value or move the slider up and down. And I'm doing this by clicking and dragging directly on the arrows. The command panel and all of its features are sectioned off into different rollouts, these gray bars that have titles on them. Clicking them will roll them up and down. Preferably when we're working with a primitive and we want to edit the primitive's parameters, it's best to do it in the Modify panel. The Modify panel is directly to the right of the Create panel. The Modify panel gives us access to the parameters for our objects. We also have access to a modifier stack. Modifiers are objects that actually deform your 3D primitive. We can add them through the Modify list, choosing them in alphabetical order. I'm going to choose a taper. You can see that the taper is sitting on top of the sphere in the modifier stack. So it's giving us a history of that object from the primitive to the taper. And you can go up and down. We can change the taper amount. You can see the object in the scene becomes a little bit more top-like a top. Moving to the right of our Modify panel is the Hierarchy panel. The Hierarchy panel has multiple functions. We have our rollouts, and by default, the Hierarchy panel is open to Pivot. This gives us control over the pivot, which is the icon that we see here in gray and red that have the X, Y, and Z arrows. To the right of the Hierarchy panel is the Motion panel. This gives us control over the parameters for animation, animation controllers, and trajectories. Again, to the right is our Display panel. The Display panel gives us control over hiding categories of objects like lights, cameras, and geometry, or specific objects. Hide by selection. We can also freeze our objects, which makes them so they're visible in the viewport but not selectable. And then lastly, we have our Utilities. Utilities section contains miscellaneous utility programs, our asset browser, measuring tools, functions for motion capture. The command panel is also where we can go to name our objects and assign specific colors to them. I clicked on the command panel, and you can see here at the bottom of the command panel it says Sphere 001. I can call this Egg, and I can give it a specific color by clicking on the color swatch. Let's just make it a yellow. Name and color is the rollout that this function is under, and you can find it in any of the command panels. Modify panel, it's at the top. Display, it's at the top. So we always know what name, and we can identify colors also. In this video, we learned to use the command panel, how to navigate and access its different tabs, use its icons and buttons, and adjust spinners to enter values for parameters. We also learned how functions and parameters are organized into sections called rollouts, and how tabs are organized.